Ultimately, this comes down to Mr. Kyrie Irving.
Great, so let's move on. Let's move on.
Anti-Semitic.
Let's move on.
I think Kyrie Irving should retire.
I'm not doing that.
Another
You're
human
free to
being. I
post
can
what.
post.
Flip side to it is that his level of stubbornness has elevated to a glaring level of selfishness.
There's another answering your question. Oh my God, let's make another Instagram clip so we can be famous again.
Ask KD and James Harden to come on board with you in Brooklyn to establish your own legacy, and then you leave them hanging.
Kyrie Irving, a player who players of this generation regard as the most skilled player ever. A player that players state has no weaknesses offensively. Magician, genius, the compliments you can give a player, Kyrie more than likely deserves. So then why is the video titled The Redemption of Kyrie? Well, to talk about that, we will have to go back in history to explain the redemption of Kyrie. Kyrie was drafted #1 overall by the Cleveland Cavaliers and was already getting steady minutes in his first year with the Cavs, although they didn't make the playoffs. Kyrie showed the Cavaliers that it wasn't a wasted effort to pick him #1. However, due to poor roster construction, they wouldn't be able to make the playoffs for 2 more years. This playoff drought would come to an end, however, when a certain player by the name of LeBron James came back to settle some unfinished business. Along with other players like JR, Iman, Tristan, Kevin Love, this team had its Batman and Robin, and it had a couple other players. For a team that had not tasted playoff success or the playoffs at all, this team exceeded expectations. The first round opponent being the Celtics, which the Cavs would go on to sweep. The Bulls put up more of a fight, but they would get beat 4-2. And the Hawks would be defeated in the same fashion as the Celtics. And only one opponent would be left, the Warriors. Unfortunately for Kyrie, luck would not be in his favor, as in a freak play would injure his kneecap, leaving him unable to play. And with the Warriors being the Warriors, the Cavs would go on to lose the 2015 finals. Rather than being sour about the experience, Kyrie would state that he is hopeful for the next year. He was right to be about, as this would be the year that would cement him as one of the top point guards of his era and have him earn the respect of many players around the league. This is the 2015-2016 season. 2015-16, a season to remember. For Kyrie, this season would be used to recover from his kneecap fracture. In fact, he wouldn't play a single game or see the floor until a game against the 76ers on December 20th, where he recorded 12 points. But finally, the duo of Batman and Robin were back, and it seemed the team were destined to return to the finals. They would finish the season with 57 wins, and their first opponent would be the Pistons. They would go on to sweep not only the Pistons, but their next opponent, the Hawks. And the Raptors would pull with 2 games, but would lose the series. And their familiar foe was there, the Golden State Warriors. And it seemed like history would go on to repeat itself, as the Warriors would take a 3-1 lead. However, LeBron and Kyrie would do something that had never been done before. They would go God mode and go on to win 3 games in a row in almost legendary fashion and take Cleveland's first ever ring home. And while the champagne and everything seemed sunny at first, for Kyrie, it brought on a rather confusing feeling, emptiness. In a couple interviews, he states that he didn't feel as invested in the 2016 team and went on to distance himself from the team afterwards. And while he offers a lot of explanations, the main one was change. While other reasons would be not feeling fulfilled, this crack wouldn't open up until the end of 2017. Kyrie would have an incredible 2016-17 season, and being the reigning champion, people's expectations were for them to do it again. And while they would return to the finals, the Warriors had to answer a 3-1 comeback effort. Could have beat KD. And while they would lose 4-1, Kyrie stated himself he sees himself staying for 2 to 3 more years, attempting to repeat the magic of 2016. However, in a call with First Take, the crack in Cleveland finally opened itself up. First Take set Kyrie up, and within this call, Kyrie would open up about wanting to be traded. And like First Take or the media tends to do, is spin this narrative into a Kyrie or LeBron beef, something way more than what it was, and a bunch of teams were hot to call Kyrie. But the one that interested the point guard the most was the Celtics, who would go on and add Kyrie to their young team. JT, JB, Al Horford, Gordon Hayward, Marcus Smart, and the team looked great. However, luck once again would have a bad moment where Gordon would suffer a horrific injury. JT fortunately stepped up, and it seemed for now the Celtics were bound for the playoffs. However, Kyrie's knee would act up, who then would go back to Cleveland for surgery. In this surgery, it was discovered that Kyrie had an infection in his knee, deeming him unable to go outside or do normal things and play for the remainder of the season. The Celtics would go on to make the Eastern Conference Finals, but the fans and media would become a mob of hating Kyrie, calling him a bad leader, a man who wasn't there for his team, a letdown. Following the announcement of Kyrie's plan to stay and win in Boston, tragic news would strike Kyrie and his family. His grandfather would pass, and it doesn't matter who you are, how strong you are, or what you have, nothing will replace a figure like that in your life. And Kyrie, of course, is just human. Kyrie wasn't himself and said his love of basketball withered due to things that were happening around him. Of course, this would affect his play going into the playoffs, and they would lose 1-4 to the Bucks. Following the end of the season, requested a trade to Brooklyn, a destination that would not help him in the slightest. An era filled with questions, controversies, and what ifs. And of course, it never starts out rocky. Kyrie would get injured in his right shoulder, limiting him to 20 games, but of course with him and Kevin Durant out, there were hopes that next year was going to be better. That offseason, James Harden was acquired, and talks of this team winning the chip next year became one of the biggest topics. Kyrie and the Nets probably had a really close shot of winning the title this year, as Kyrie will recover and play 54 games and looked himself for the most part. Side note, those throwback net jerseys looked crisp, and this game was iconic, but besides that, the big three looked primed to take the chip away. 48 wins doesn't really tell the whole story, as they would send Boston home in the first round and would face the Bucks. And as Jeff Teague says in his retelling in the story, the Nets looked primed to win this series. The notion that would change after Kyrie's ankle got hurt, and of course Harden would go down as well, as the Bucks would seemingly come back out of nowhere and go on to win the championship. A heartbreaking loss. This year was supposed to be the year they win. Of course, there's always next year, right? This season was a complete dumpster fire. Kyrie only played a limited amount of games due to the infamous COVID fiasco that took place, and a bunch of other stuff that I would not want to talk about. If there was any way to put a Brooklyn farewell together, this would not be it. Following the 2021 season, Kyrie would be traded to the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks have been in need of someone who could score alongside Luka Doncic, as that had been one of their shortcomings in the previous seasons, and Kyrie had experience being a scorer alongside one of the greats. Of course, the two required time and a couple more pieces to be championship bound, as nothing of note happened immediately, except for once Kyrie seemed happy for the first time since the Cleveland days. The difference in his interviews were already night and day. 2023 in hindsight was a successful season, even if the success wasn't easy to see. Kyrie, a more mature person and basketball player, and finally reached a place that might seem like a second home. A stretch. Of course, this video wouldn't be complete if it weren't for a magical season like 2023-24 season. Here is the redemption of Kyrie. With new pieces acquired in PJ Lively, Kyrie and Luka look to chase the ring, and they would go on to make a statement in the game against Denver in March. In the last seconds, it's tie game. Either person could win this. Of course, no one would expect Kyrie to hit a left-handed floater. This is one of my favorite Kyrie games ever. Just one of the many vintage games Kyrie has. Of course, a few months later, playoffs would come around, and their first opponent, the 5-star Clippers, would face them in the first round. And I'm sorry, Terrence, man, you tried your best. And so did you, PJ, but the Mavs beat the Clippers 4-2. All thanks to Luka and vintage Kyrie. Their next opponents would be OKC, a younger group that everybody plays defense on. And despite how OKC lost, they put up a fight. Unfortunately, experience and mistake on defense cost the OKC. But now they had to face a foe that, I'm not gonna lie with you, I had them winning. I had the Timberwolves winning this series. These guys looked primed to win against Dallas. But what is that saying? Good defense, way better offense? Well, either way, it wasn't even close. The Wolves got beat 4-1, and Kyrie had just made another trip to the finals against the Celtics. And did they win? In heartbreaking fashion, they would lose. But Kyrie, throughout the 2 years he has had with Dallas, has effectively shut up the people who doubted his ability to contribute to winning basketball. And Kyrie proved once again why he is one of the best point guards ever. Kyrie is one of the best players ever in my opinion. Not just because of his otherworldly handles and layups, but just because of his mental strength and persistence despite what people have thrown him in his career. Kyrie will definitely be a Hall of Famer by the time his career ends, and I'm glad I got to witness his game with my own 2 eyes. I was just watching some Kyrie clips to practice, and I got inspired to make this video. Anyways, Dallas is gonna win next year. Peace.